Welcome to the Create Today podcast. This show is all about how you can create the life that you want one day at a time, no matter what kind of shit you've been through. I'm your host, Karen Stanley, and my guest is Melissa Grosz, and I'm so happy she's here. She's the mom of three, I was going to say teenagers, but one of them is just turned in her early 20s, his early 20s. And she's the founder of It's Easy to Be Me. She has been in the corporate world for a long time, but now she helps teenagers build confidence and the life skills that they need. And I'm so excited as the mom of two teenagers. Also, one of them's not a teenager anymore, but you know what I mean. We all need help with our teenagers, and all of our teenagers need help. So Melissa, thank you so much for being here today and helping us and helping our teens.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad and appreciative to have the opportunity to visit with you.
Yeah, heck yeah. I wanted to see, right before we started recording, we were talking about my own teen daughter and working and all of that. And I want to get into that because I want to know what your answer is, how we can help me, because, you know, it's my show, so it's all about me. Just kidding. What do you think are the biggest challenges our teens are facing right now, and therefore parents of teenagers are facing? What are the challenges that you're seeing in your practice?
Yeah, so from the parent perspective, I think that parents, each generation is different. And so I kind of struggle because I don't want to be the kind of get off my lawn type person that's like, oh, my generation. But the reality is, from one generation to the next, things have really moved quite rapidly. And so, parents, I think that the struggles that they have are the same that you see generation over generation, except they have this added component of how fast technology and the world just kind of shifted. It wasn't a minor change from one generation to the next. And so I'm sure you felt it. I feel it even today as a parent that, I feel like even though you have 18 plus years with these kids, it doesn't feel like enough time. And then once you get to the point where you start realizing that you're kind of running out of time, you're in this weird phase where you're essentially competing for their attention, you're competing for their time. And then it's like, not only do you not have a lot of time, it's like you just get brief little snippets where they even will give you their attention, and you really kind of have to monopolize on that. And then on the flip side, the kids, they have all this stuff that's competing for their attention. And when you're a teenager, the way your brain is processing things, it's hard unless you're actually intentional and you have somebody helping you. It's hard to separate out what you're receiving and internalizing as, I don't want to call it reality, but when you think about social media, have I ever really met this person? Because they feel like a friend. I know them so well because I feel like I've gotten to know them through social media. And so I think the kids, it really just comes down to, they have all this, I call it feedback, that is coming at them, whether it's through their screens, through teachers at school, through their friends, and taking that feedback and deciphering it and deciding what to do with it. I think that's probably the biggest struggle. And I don't even know that the teenagers know that they're struggling with it.
Because it's so normal for them. That's the very first generation that has never been without the internet and had never been without a smartphone. I don't know about you, but I didn't give my kids any kind of smart, tablets or iPods or any of that stuff until, I want to say, 12 with like an iPod. I remember like getting the little mini iPads one Christmas. So I tried to delay that as much as possible. And then obviously way later for phones, but I still wish I would have waited even longer. And so I think you're right on. I like that you called it feedback, because it's literally almost the same as every adult. We all have a really hard time managing all those distractions and getting done what we need to do. But what do you think is different about it from a teenager's perspective, from like a little teenage mind, instead of from ours that's fully developed? Theirs isn't fully developed.
Yeah, so I think there's two things. I think when you're a teenager, while you do have the power to decide for yourself, I think that because the way the world is structured for you, where you have all these rules and requirements in the home and at school and everything, I think that it's hard to realize that you have the power yourself to decide. So that's the one thing. I mean, at our age, if someone were to say something to us that we disagree with, we may be, we're probably better equipped to decide for ourselves, but not only from the fact that our brain is fully developed, but because, in the rest of our world, we have autonomy, right? In the rest of our world, we have control over the different facets.
Mm,
And so I think for the teenagers, one, just knowing that you do have power, even though it feels like you're in this kind of subordinate type role elsewhere in your life. And then two, the way our brain develops is it develops from back to front. So essentially, even before you're born, you're starting to gain the functions that help protect you. And so that is highly focused on emotions and responses. So that fight or flight type situation, and the part of the brain that can rationalize whether that fight or flight feeling is real or something to be listened to or what to do with that information, it doesn't develop fully until age probably around 25, sometimes a little bit earlier, but by 25 it's developed. So if you think about it, as a teenager, you are essentially, your brain is on this overdrive, perceiving all these threats and fears and worries and just all this emotion, but the part of the brain that's supposed to help you weed through what that emotion is underdeveloped. And so when you see teenagers that are I'll call it highly emotional, highly responsive, that is something that really, it's their brain doing it to them. And so part of it is just getting them to understand how their brain develops, so that when they're having those highly charged moments, they can
mm,
try and tap into the part of the brain that is supposed to help rationalize whether that's a justifiable or real feeling, or if it's just their brain being super sensitive trying to protect them.
mm. So how do we do that? How do we help them process all of these things that they're dealing with?
Yeah, and that's the tough part, because I mean, just speaking personally, I mean, if I could be the helicopter mom that just followed them around and gave them the moral support they needed the whole time, I would. That's totally my personality, but we can't be there all the time. In fact, as they get into the teenage years, man, I feel like I'm such a small portion of their life. And so the only thing that we can do is prepare them. And by prepare them, I mean give them the knowledge of, how is your brain working, the skills of, hey, this is what you can do with that, um, and then work to build their confidence, so that when they're in those situations, that as a parent I can feel confident that my kiddo can stand on their own 2 feet and at least recognize and navigate the situation even if it's tough, um, and then be there for them if they want to kind of debrief it or talk about it later. But
Yeah.
really, it's all about helping them understand why their brain and body does what it does, and
Mm,
then also giving them the skills to, um, I like to say, you control your brain doesn't control you. So it's really about being intentional.
mm. Good. Well, I want to get into exactly what those skills are, how, how you teach them. Do you find that sometimes they're more receptive from somebody besides the parent?
Yes and no. In the moment, yes. And so it's one of the stories I like to tell. My oldest will probably kill me for saying this, but my
You
oldest
probably
is
won't listen to
a
it.
right, probably that's true. Um,
You're safe.
my oldest is introverted, and as he was going through high school, he was trying to figure out career path, because they're all trying to figure out where they're going, what school. And I would tell him, like, buddy, you are an amazing writer, you'd be a great journalist, and it was like, "Pff, pff, no, not interested." And then one day we're sitting there eating dinner, and he tells me about this teacher, and he's like, "Oh, my teacher said I'd be a great journalist." And I'm like, really? That's a
Hmm,
great idea.
go
I'm glad
figure.
they thought about it. So to
What
some
a
degree,
smart teacher.
right, right. Wish I would have thought of that. But to some degree, I say yes, they absolutely, I think, real time listen to others. Maybe they hear it a little bit better real time, but I think over time, parents have a longer term influence on their kids. And so Ed Milet talks about the difference between caught and taught. So it's how, as parents, we are navigating the world ourselves, because they're watching us, obviously, and then the things that we say to them. And I'm sure you've had this with your own kids, but you'll hear them say something as if it was their own idea, but it's something that you have been saying on repeat basically since the day they were born. So I don't want to discredit parents' ability to influence their kids, because I think that's one of the biggest influences in your life. But in reality, your teenagers are probably a little more easily influenced real time by other influences like their favorite teacher or friends, or somebody that makes them feel good, basically.
Yeah, or coaches. That's why I think we all
Coaches,
need
yes.
outside coaches like you. And that's why, over my mother career, I've hired all kinds of therapists, coaches. When I was single, I got my son into Big Brother, Big Sister. And so he got a Big Brother mentor, any program I could think of, to just have some outside influences. But when they were smaller, I was the circle of their life. And then now, as you just described, you feel like you are competing for, I can't even get that sentence out without crying. Competing
It
for their
is.
time. I mean, it makes my eyes water. It's so true, and they're going to leave at some point, and thank God mine haven't left yet. They're not moving out anytime soon, but and so I feel like, what is the reason why a teenager, especially in the last couple of years before they know they're going to be, they want their independence so much. So did I. I remember I could not wait to get, and there's nothing wrong with my parents or my childhood. I just couldn't wait to get out. I wanted to do it my own way. Of course, she's exactly like me. My daughter's 17. She's right around the corner from being 18. She's already done with high school. She's trying to figure it all out. But she sees herself as this, strong, independent woman that is just gonna, all she cares about is decorating her new apartment, that whenever that's going to happen, she's got $4 in her bank account, but she thinks she's going to get an apartment any second, but why is it that, what else could be the factors of really kind of needing an outside source, or needing an outside mentor, or needing other great mentors for leaders for our teens besides the parents? Is it just because they want their independence so badly and they're tired of listening to you, or what?
Yeah, so I'd be speculating. Because my background is definitely not in that area. I would be speculating, but my guess and the way I feel about it is, your parents are your safe space, right? I mean, have you ever noticed how your kids can be pretty harsh with parents and they're not necessarily as harsh with other people? And it's partly because they're the safe space, and parents are, the ones that have to love you no matter what, are going to be there for you no matter what. And while that's great, it kind of also, I feel like to some degree makes them feel like, oh, you're my mom, you have to say that.
Yeah.
And so to some degree, I think that it's more so about getting confidence and boosting and having somebody else validate that you are capable and that you are going to be able to navigate this.
That makes sense. They don't believe you after a while. It's like, oh, whatever. You always tell me everything's great.
Right.
I'm always great. You're always giving me confidence, but then they'll also, turn around and say, not every conversation needs to be a life coach session, mom. So how do we help? Give us some tools and tips, and tactics, actual strategies for helping our kids be successful, be confident, adults in the future. What do we do? What do you do?
Yeah, so I am big on questions, but the catch is you have to ask the question and be willing to hear the answer, even if it's not the answer that you were hoping or anticipating for, which is kind of tough, especially as teenagers. I mean, you're talking about how your daughter just is ready to go live this world and she doesn't have, a dollar in her bank account. So it's hard, because as soon as they respond, you want to be like, yeah, but what about this? And what about this? What about this? And so for me, it's bite size, right? So what are we focusing on? And then just asking questions that help lead to that. And so is one of the things that I mean, we've talked about it already briefly here, but one of the things that I really enforce on my kids is you decide. And so if you think about it, if you think about where feedback comes from, it comes from your parents, it comes from your teachers, it comes from your friends, it comes from the people that aren't your friends. It comes from, even if, like, say your 16-year-old's driving and someone cuts them off in traffic, that's feedback. The phone, social media, so there's all this feedback that's coming at them. And the way our brain at that age works is sometimes it makes up what that feedback is in kind of in an attempt to protect you. Um, and so I'm really big on asking, well, telling my kids, hey, you decide. And this is something we go through in the program as well. Very early on, it's one of the first things that we try and educate the teenagers on. But when you receive a piece of feedback and you feel that way, the question is, hey, do you agree? And so I'll give an example. My daughter was kindergarten, actually, so this is not teenage talk, but I still
Mhm.
do it to her today. She was in kindergarten, and she got into some confrontation with some little girl. And at that age, it's like your best friends one day and frenemies the next day. It kind of goes back
Yeah.
and forth. And they
Yeah.
got in this confrontation. And Isabella, my daughter, um, one, had her friend say that she's no longer a friend anymore. So feedback one. Teacher gets involved and scolds both the little girls and sends them to the principal's office, which, side note, that feels a little bit excessive, but so they go to the principal's office, and then she gets feedback there. And then from there, they go to the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor talks to them about how don't you want to be friends with everyone, and gives them all that feedback. And then by the time I got home, I had an email. So then she's anticipating getting feedback from me. And it was all over one little scenario. And I thought, wow, how many people were just in this little girl's head over something that was pretty trivial? And
Yeah.
so I did talk to her about it. And she says, well, she says I talk a lot. I'm like, well, do you? She said, yeah. Like, do you like that about yourself? Yeah. Then say thank you and move on. And so it's kind of a long way to say it, but I just feel like one of the best things we can give our kids is the ability to, when they take in information, giving them permission to decide for themselves, whether that's positive information, negative information, neutral. And then if it's positive, then it's a win. If it's something that you don't like or you want to change, then you have the choice to change it. You have the power to change it from there. And so that's foundationally, I think, one of the best things we can give our kids. And then when you have that ability to decide for yourself, that automatically builds your confidence because it
Mhm.
basically gives you the power.
I love that. Almost like, is it Brene Brown who has the "Is it true?" Kind of like this 4-step, how to how to change your beliefs, or decipher what your beliefs. So basically, you're teaching them from a younger age to decipher the feedback, kind of like translate the feedback and
Right.
see if it's true or not. And then, do we like that or not? Is it good or bad? Do we want to change? Do we want to keep it? Whatever it is. I think that's brilliant.
Well, it helps you understand who you are too, because it's like,
Yeah.
I feel like, especially in middle school, gosh, that's one of the reasons why we try to start talking to them about this in middle school, because middle school is such a tough place and you're just trying to fit in. And sometimes if you take that feedback and you're so desperate to fit in, you kind of lose sight of who you are, or you just don't really even know. And so if you at least have those tools, you can at least, if nothing else, kind of hold on to who you are. And then hopefully that helps you also, if you hold on to who you are and you make those decisions for yourself, then it should lead to you being around your people, right? You're
Mm.
attracting more people that are like you versus attracting people that you're trying to be.
Yeah. And everyone around you is trying to be that same thing.
Right.
That's really hard to put your brain around, talking about the brain when you're 12 and 13. It's very difficult. What are some other things that you do to help teenagers grow these life skills and grow more confidence?
Yep. So I think foundationally, we talked about, I start with, hey, who are you? And do you know who you are and how to tell who you are? And so
Mhm.
a lot of the beginning parts and conversations surround around energy, because we know that if we are in alignment with ourselves, we naturally have more energy, and more energy means hopefully more confidence. And then
Mm,
once we have that foundation of like, hey, who are we and how can we identify in any moment if what we're doing aligns with who we are? And
mm,
if we don't know, then, it's an opportunity to decide, how we feel about things. Then after you have that foundation, because I really firmly believe you have to have that first, you have to kind of have this understanding of who you are, or at least a way to ground yourself to decide whatever it is you're trying to decide or do, if it aligns with you. Then from there, we work on basic assets and resources. And when I say assets and resources, helping kids understand that you already have the assets and resources you need to be successful. And when I say successful, I mean just in any goal you set out there. I think it's easy to feel like, oh, my parents don't have this and didn't give me this advantage, or, oh, and kind of discount what you do have. And so it's really helping them understand that we have our minds, we have our bodies, we all have time, and we all to some degree have money or the ability to obtain money. It may not be vast amount, but you work with what you've got.
mhm.
And then as far as we have relationships and breaking down different relationships. And so if you can understand those things and start focusing on um, investing in them and nurturing that aspect of it,
Mm.
you're already set up for just basic achieving goals. And so that's kind of where we start. And then from there, we go on to talk about some more of the more like peaceful stuff about how to read your own energy and protect your peace so that you know what that looks like. And I think you and I had talked about this in the past, even as adults, the world just throws so much at you. And so once you realize that's happening, what can you do to make
Yeah.
sure that what you're doing sets you up the way you want life to be?
Are you teaching like when you talk about peace, are you talking about like mindset, mindset solutions, or calming yourself or like your nervous system, or what do you mean?
It's more about the things you do in your life. So
Mhm.
the very first part is your perspective.
Mm,
Your perspective really has a huge impact on how you see the world, and how you see the world impacts how you feel. And then I'm a huge proponent of energy, reading the energy that you're feeling, because that'll help you. But then also taking how to take action, um, and control your environment, things like that.
mm,
So I'll give you an example on the environment thing that is I hopefully helpful to teenagers, even into college and adults. But I think a lot about our environment, and my what I require in my environment to feel what I want to feel is going to be different than what you require. And so, for example, I am an anti-clutter person, to the point that like my kids, as they get up, they're like, Mom, don't touch it. I'm not done with it yet. Because I will come behind them and clear everything out of the way, because clutter really, really stresses me. My soon to be 18-year-old loves clutter. And when I say clutter, I don't mean like messy. I mean like she's a knick-knacky person, and all the different books, and every section of her wall is covered in posters, and which is odd. I didn't realize people still did posters, but
same. My daughter's exactly the same. She has
yeah,
little knickknacks everywhere. Every inch of her room has something in it.
right. And so in that environment, I would have a hard time being productive or calm in that
Yeah.
environment. I mean, we don't always want to be go, go, go. Sometimes we want to be calm, but either way, I would have a hard time in that environment. But Isabella loves my 18-year-old. She in that environment, she feels good. She can get her work done. And so part of the, peace section that we talk about is understanding what works for you. Are you a
Mm.
morning person? Are you more productive in the morning? Are you more productive at night? Just understanding yourself so that you can build your life so that you can achieve whatever it is you want to achieve, whether it be the goals or that peaceful feeling, and the time that you want to focus on you, those kinds of things.
Ah, I love that. Because I don't think, I don't, maybe it's just me, but I don't think I thought about any of that until I was, about 4 decades in.
Yeah,
And that would
that's
have been
one of the things
so,
I talk about,
yeah.
how I had, we all I as we age, I think we all talk about how, oh, I must be going through a midlife crisis, and then you realize, oh no, the next decade I'm like, oh, I'm going through another one, and the next decade. But one of the things that I am disappointed about in my own journey is that there is this huge chunk of time where I don't feel like my life was not bad by any means, but I
Yeah.
don't feel like I truly understood myself. I didn't understand. I mean, I knew to some degree, I knew where I was morally guided and everything, but I didn't understand um how to set my world up so that it aligned with me. And you look back, you're like, oh man, what could I have done with that time? I mean, I could have
Yeah.
been, even I think about when my kids were young, I could have been a better mom. I could have, you say all these
Same.
things, but part of the hope is that if you can help the teenager starting in middle school, I mean, I told you the story about kindergarten. I mean, technically my poor kids have my poor kids probably are tired of the life skill lectures too. But if you catch them in middle school and you help keep them grounded, the hope is that maybe they won't have this decade or two that you and I had, where we look back and go, oh, I wish I would have known that. Um, I wish I would have had that knowledge, that I could have made that time of my life a little bit better.
Yeah. That would have been so amazing to even just be aware of those things and just the awareness of what in my environment really gives me energy and what sucks the energy away from me. I didn't even think to ask that question until I was, in my late 30s. And I even wrote, that's part of, the whole attract the one, strategy that I used. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was preparing my space in my home to get it more in alignment with what's really going to make me happy. And it's a whole chapter in my book because I didn't realize how much it was sucking the life of me. I wanted my kids to have a big playground. My house was a huge playground. They would have, like, up the stairs, they would tie blankets in between the railings all the way up and make hammocks. And then underneath them would be mattresses so they
I
could slide
thank
down.
God for the mattresses. You're making me nervous.
And I mean, they used so much duct tape that every single one of my blankets was ruined, every single one of them, which I didn't care because I didn't have anything that was worth any money anyway. But I wanted them to be playing. I wanted anything I would do anything in order for them to be playing and creating and building and whatever, which is all great and fine, but not necessarily the best situation to have peace and calm for mom. And so I really had to find that balance and maybe just make the kid spaces the kid spaces. And then little by little create more order, because I realized that disorder attracts disorder. So you're going to attract disorder. Anyway, that was a huge sidebar. I just wish that I would have known that earlier, just to your point. So teaching these kids, so I love this. You're teaching them the awareness of what makes them have good energy or what sucks their energy out. And then the awareness of what their feedback. So they're learning how to process and all the feedback that comes at them. I love that. And then what else? Is there another thing that you really work on?
Yeah, so a lot of it is, we spend a lot of time focusing on the assets and resources. So basically,
Oh.
your mind, body, time, finances, and relationships.
Mm,
Because even if they don't stick with us past that point, I feel like those things are huge. I mean, I so much about what we put in. So when we talk about inputs,
mm,
what are you listening to? What are you saying to yourself? What are you speaking out loud? And just kind of the reality that whatever you are thinking about and speaking about, you're essentially, giving energy to that in the world. And so you might as well harness it for something good, right? And so
yes.
how do we use our resources for good? And how do we another thing that we really focus on is relationships. And I think that
Yeah.
is becoming increasingly more important because when I was younger, my sphere of relationships was so much smaller because it was just the people you came in contact with. It wasn't social media. I mean, I didn't even texting. I mean, we eventually got pagers, you know what I mean? But you still had to know that person. um
Right.
and so a lot of it is also talking about, hey, let's put these relationships into different categories. So is
Mm,
this relationship somebody who is a friend and part of my tribe, somebody who supports me and loves me, you know, all of me, and aligns with who I
Mhm.
am? Is it
Yeah.
somebody who is part of my network, somebody that I want to help elevate and they want to help elevate me? Is it an acquaintance? And I put pretty much everybody that you've met on social media that you've never talked to in person and you only know a snippet of their life, we'll put them in the acquaintance bucket. And so it's just kind of a way to, one, assess, where relationships fall so that you can have a little bit more grounding on who you do have, because I think especially as a teenager, you need to have a network of who you can contact or communicate with. And then two, it helps you be intentional with those relationships, because when you realize that, hey, this is my tribe, these are my friends, and this is my network, it helps you kind of assess where you're spending your time and how much you're giving into those relationships and how much you're receiving, which I think is, I
Mhm.
mean, I think as an adult, a lot of adults go through this phase where they kind of take a step back and go, okay, these are the people that are my close circle, and just helping kids get there sooner, and giving them permission to allow these relationships to be in different categories, and it's okay, not everybody has to be the close friend.
Right. And then I was just thinking, once something they perceive as major happens with somebody who's in the acquaintance bucket,
Right.
that helps them realize that they're just acquaintances and never even met them in person. And so this is no big deal.
Right. Right. And that's where the you decide. That's why you decide is kind of like the theme through all the conversations, because then
Mm,
it helps you as you're taking in this information, deciding just, how much should my brain really be spending worrying about this and fretting it. And it gives you permission to minimize the response if it is
yeah.
somebody that's in this acquaintance field.
How do we help our teens they kind of struggle when they start getting jobs outside of the home? Because I was just telling you a little bit about, my daughter's jobs experiences. I'm starting to think that her, how do I say this? And she expects it to be a lot easier than it is. And then even saying that, I go, that's probably my fault. And then I go, all right, well, I can't undo whatever I did to cause her to think that it's going to be easy to build a business and follow her dreams and accomplish all of her dreams. Like we've been talking about forever, all of the dreams that she wants. And um, when it comes down to like doing the daily tasks that are required by the job, whatever the job is, I feel like her perception is that it shouldn't be so hard, but it is hard. So obviously, I don't know where I went wrong, but how can we help these kids who grow up? I feel like I'm not going to give myself 100% of all the blame, but because you think about social media and you see the little 19-year-old in front of the Lambo that, he probably rented, it's not his or it's his uncle's. And then, the others, the Photoshops of I'm sitting on a, private, a private jet. It's just a Photoshop. He's not even on a private jet, but all of these get rich quick, all of these things, those are marketing and they're not true. But you see those kind of images 10,000 times a day. You start believing that it is true. That might be some of the reasons for it, but no matter how they get it, how do we help them realize that everything, eh, anything that you really want that is really worth anything is on the other side of really hard work that you don't want to do?
Yeah, and I think, well, there's two different types of hard for me. There's the
Mm,
hard of, it's actually labor intensive hard, like,
yeah,
oh, this is a lot more than I thought. It's gonna be more hours. I gotta do more while I'm there.
yeah.
And then there's the hard part of navigating other relationships, people who are in authority that,
Mm,
aren't like the folks that are in your house or that you've encountered before. Because it's a completely different dynamic when you are now working for somebody who has invested in this company or has some type of um, whether it be ownership stake or even a management stake in
right.
the company, because now you are working with people, and I don't want to say that that they don't care about you, because that's not the case. But it's different than working for mom or working for the teacher that is in it for the right reasons and things like that. Once you transition into working,
Yeah.
you're essentially expected to pull your own weight without that counter. You don't always have that counter of this person that's trying to elevate you at the same time, if that makes sense. So I think there's two
Yes.
different hearts there.
It makes
As
sense.
as far as working with other people, I think that's where we go through this exercise. And I actually learned, I don't remember the author now, but the book is called Boundaries. And one of the takeaways I took from that book was, you have pebble sized problems in life and you have boulder sized problems. So you have pebbles that you can pick up and put in your own backpack and you can carry them up the hill and you can do it on your own. And then you have boulder size problems that require help. And so one of the things that I try to tell the kiddos when they're out navigating employment, and even as you transition into college, is to think through, hey, when I'm feeling frustrated or there's a problem in front of me, is this something that I can figure out myself and lean into it, or is it something that I need help with? Because I think a lot of frustration comes from when kiddos don't want to ask for the help, or they don't feel comfortable asking
Mm,
for the help. And then as far as the hard work stuff, unfortunately, I wouldn't beat yourself up about that. I think most of us learn that through getting out there and having that job, that we get feedback from other people saying, hey, it kind of makes me think of the kiddo that goes out for American Idol and nobody ever told them that they're really not that great of a singer, and then somebody actually tells them. So I
oh,
think part of it is just life experiences. But I will say the hard stuff, um i I think that the messaging that you used was so true. There is everything you want in life, whether it's a great relationship with a friend, or it's a job, or it's school. Every On the other side of that is always hard work. But I think it's about reframing it so that hard work is fun. That sounds silly, but I mean,
mm,
to some degree, if you know what the outcome is, um, it's easier to reframe it. And then
yeah.
the final thing I'll say on that also is, what has helped me with my kiddos is, you know, helping them empathize with the person that is asking them to do the hard work. And so, I started this from when my kids were little, and I'm sure I'm super annoying. I look back now, and these poor kiddos, they it's like one self-help book of a life, basically. But
It's
understanding when you
awesome.
go
They
places
are
that
so
this
lucky.
oh they understanding when you go places that this is somebody's dream. Wherever you're working, it was somebody's dream, and somebody cares deeply about this.
Mm,
And I think that helps kind of decide, okay, we're doing these hard things, but we're doing it because it's supporting this dream. Even if it's not my dream, it's somebody else's dream. And I think it makes you want to do it more. It feels
mm,
better than just doing work for the sake of doing work.
mm. That's so good. I love that. Thank you. Do you work with parents or do you just work with teenagers?
So I will obviously have conversations with the parents and help them understand, because I think one of the struggles as a parent entering into a situation where you're hiring a coach for your child, whether it be a coaching situation, I mean, we feel this way about teachers too, is we want to make sure that whatever is being communicated aligns with our morals and
Hmm.
what we want for our children.
Hmm.
And it feels a little helpless to send your kid off to have, to be
It
influenced.
does. It
Even though they're being
does.
influenced everywhere, it still feels a little different when you're the one making the decision.
And you're paying.
And so I obviously I talk to the parents and help them understand, hey, this is as part of the program. You can see everything that we're working on. You know all the concepts, that I'm not going to stray from these concepts. And I try very hard to stay um, focused on just the core roadmap. And the reason why I do that is, one, so that we actually get through what we intended to, but also so that I'm not, so that the parents are always aware of what conversations are being had or what is being taught. So I really don't work much with the parents. It's more about working with the kiddos. So I have either we work with the kids directly, or we try to put them in situations where they work together. So it's kind of a peer-to-peer situation where, and so much of it is just conversations. The whole point of all of it is just to give them the information, allow them to digest it, allow them to think about it and decide for themselves how they feel about it. And then the hope is that if you're exposed to it enough, it'll be something that's just kind of second nature.
You build that habit of
Yeah.
deciphering and then deciding for yourself. Wow. That is so, so cool. Thank you so much for all of this. I mean, man, anybody who has teenagers needs to listen to this, because I feel we're all probably struggle with similar things, because teenagers are going through a certain time of life where a lot of crazy cocktails are going on in their brains and their hormones and all of the things. So I really appreciate you. And how can people find you?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to find me is on Instagram. If it's at easy to be me. I had to think about that, but yeah, on Instagram. And there we provide weekly concepts, just a kind of brief lesson, if you will. Don't call it a lesson with your teenager though, because that'll make them not want
Yeah.
to do it. But
Don't tell them
there's
it's a lesson.
a weekly message and then daily questions that just help you have a quick conversation. And the idea is that it gives parents the opportunity to introduce a topic that is coming from somebody else. So back to our, are they influenced more by others than our parents?
Yeah.
So it's somebody else's idea, and it prompts you certain questions to ask, and all you have to do is listen. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just helping your kid think through how they feel about the topic and where they land on it. So I think Instagram is the best place, and that's
Yeah.
you can
Awesome.
DM me from there too.
Yeah. Well, make sure you do that. And the 2 is the number 2, but I'll put the link in the show notes, obviously. And that's great. Thank you. And listeners, thank you so much for being here and listening to my show. God bless you. And just remember that you can create the life you want one day at a time, even if you have teenagers.
I love it.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
God bless. Thank you.